Poppy Playtime is a series that needs no introduction. From its rocky beginnings filled with controversies, NFTs, and a chapter 1 costing $5 USD or $7 AUD, but despite that, it still managed to revitalize the mascot horror genre and made way for things like Ban to gain mass popularity. We then got a mediocre chapter 2, that introduced some fun mechanics and showed the community that yes, these guys know how to make a game, with some great scenes of horror, a fantastic swinging mechanic, and some meh characters, except my boy PJ. We love this little guy on the Cordial YouTube channel. And after that, we got an absolutely amazing chapter 3, which was the only chapter that I bought and released at that point, and I had a very good time with it. The scares were fantastic, Catnap was a great villain despite not having a lot of screen time, the mechanics and puzzles introduced were great, which is probably the reason I have over 50 hours in this game, and it finally felt like Mob was ready to make new and amazing chapters to round out the second half of their story. And that brings us to chapter 4, and boy howdy do I have a lot to say about this chapter. The last 6 months leading up to Chapter 4's release were an amazing time to be a Poppy Playtime fan. With an ARG, multiple character reveals with people getting attached to them before we even saw them in game, and trust me, I'll get back to that, and trailers upon trailers being released to get the community going. So let's see. Has Mob delivered on the promise of the darkest chapter yet in the epic Poppy Playtime saga? Have they kept their standards of quality for Chapter 3 and I'm about to have an amazing time? Did they lose their footing and stumble a little bit? Or is this going to be an outright mess? And did they do my boys Yarnaby and Pianosaurus any justice? So without any further ado, let's jump into the latest entry of Poppy Playtime and discover just what John Playtime was hiding in the depths of the factory.
Go on ahead. Don't wait for me.
Chapter 4 begins as Free left off, with Kissy in danger and Poppy leading us down to the prison. Poppy tells us she refuses to leave Kissy behind and ruin their plans because of her. And she preps us that down here will be nothing like we've seen before. It will be hell, because that's exactly what Playtime wanted it to be. Hell's to torment the toys and to twist them into obedience. With our only device being the fall of the red smoke and a warning to look out for someone as we proceed into sublevel 1E. And we get a reintroduction to the swinging, and I don't like it. See, Mob has this habit of every chapter pretty much overhauling their entire UI and movement systems, even though they were completely fine the chapter before. In chapter 2, you would extend your arm and you could hold the button to reel yourself in and allow swinging, and release it to let go. Here, it's just click, jump, and land. And it just doesn't feel right or sit right with me, and if this is a system they plan to use for chapter 5 and potentially beyond that, then I'm just not a fan of it at all. There were some nice changes, however. I really like the little scared shake the hands did every once in a while, and the new inventory system is overall a lot sleeker and easier to navigate. We then collect the battery and scan our hand on the new scanners as we proceed into the foreman's office, where we find a note telling us that the red smoke has actually been a combustible all this time, and with enough pressure, it could cause a massive explosion. We then go through a small tutorial segment to refamiliarize ourselves with the game's mechanics, before reaching checkpoint 1A, the area just outside the prison, where we learn that the flare hand actually has a new mechanic. That being to set things on fire. So we burn the rope holding the doors closed and enter into the exterior of the prison. This is such a terrifying environment. The place is covered pretty much floor to ceiling in the bodies of every conceivable toy. The atmosphere is almost suffocating and foreboding, knowing that the toys still standing, those still running around the prison, were the ones with the strength and will to survive this hell. As we drag ourselves through the piled up bodies of dead and mangled toys, presumably tossed away when they're of no use, we begin to notice that we're not alone here, as the nightmare critters and mini huggies begin watching us from the shadows, before the prison door begins to shut and the lights of the prison flashbang us, giving the mini huggies an opportunity to attack us. And I love how stupid these things look, especially when they jump, like oh my god, he's flying. This doesn't last long however, and with our original entryway blocked, we're forced to head a different way, climbing up the bodies of toys and seeing our first actual corpse in the game, before Ollie calls us for the first time.
Hey, it's me again, Ollie. I wanted to talk to you.
Ollie's tone compared to the last chapter has changed. He's more monotone, less hyper, and clearly a lot more worried about us, but also somewhat sounding disengaged, like he's distracted by something, telling us to be safe and to not let our guard down for a second around here, before we head up and collect the key that's been stuffed in the destroyed body of a toy, with bones and fur being the only things left. And what I find most haunting about this is the fact that not only do we find notes detailing a child named Riley's life in isolation and play care, before she is then chosen and turned into a toy, eventually waking up during the hour of joy, refusing to take part and locking herself in here with the key to starve to death. It's such a short and easy to miss character, but the fact that Mob can make me feel sympathy towards a corpse and her struggles in life is credit to the wonderful storytelling we'll be seeing much more of as the chapter progresses. Not to mention the design of this body is also just so disturbing, because not only is her skull enlarged and looks to be crafted to fit a mold, because that is definitely not a human skull, meaning that what we assume the process to be, that being using vital parts of a human body and modifying the rest to fit inside a toy, is actually more to keep the consciousness and vital parts of the person alive and crafting a new body from scratch. Taking the key, we solve a simple electrical puzzle and meet the creator of the bigger bodies, and the mastermind behind every creature we've fought up to this point, Dr. Harley Sawyer.
Now what's this? Do I feel something squirming its way beneath my skin? An invasive foreign little germ. After all this time? Ah, but I see. You. Well, little germ, let's make a game of you. We've blundered along the shadows above, and only managed to squirm all the way down here, but by the barest skin of your teeth. There are no shadows here that will be of use to you. Not even the ground beneath your feet is yours. There are no places you can hide. Not from me.
This is, without a shadow of a doubt, the best introduction to a character I think Poppy has ever done. It immediately sets up the Doctor as an imposing threat, someone who has complete control over the facility, reminding us once again that we are no longer in safe territory and that we are well and truly in too deep. With no allies and no escape, with the entire building we now roam actively working against us. As for the remainder of the chapter, he will continue to monitor us via security cameras and appearing on monitors, closing doors and sending enemies after us for his own amusement, letting us know that if he wanted to, Harley could kill us at any moment. Waking up, we open the door to our cell and exit out into the prison, which is such a haunting environment. Just before coming here, we got a VHS tape that talks about the east and north wings of the prison, and how the east wing is filled with toys begging for their parents and counselors 24/7, with the guards forced to just sit there and listen to children's cries and pleas. Whereas the north wing is filled to the brim with the bigger bodies, creatures that no longer have a semblance of any humanity left. And with that knowledge, these padded cells and locked doors take on an entirely new level of dread, as the Doctor closes the obvious path forward and we need to drop down to the lower floors, which are filled with piles of burning critters, as we soon find a familiar face. Lemon. Proceeding forward, we are reunited with our Red Hand from Chapter 1, before the Doctor appears to taunt us once more, and we're forced to fight off hordes of released and hungry nightmare critters and mini huggies. And look, I was a day one nightmare critters defender, okay? I was willing to let Mob cook, and possibly give us some really interesting characters that parallel the smiling critters we saw before. But this little scene here, this little fight scene, is 50% of their entire screen time this whole chapter, and I don't see why they couldn't just reuse the smiling critters again, especially since these guys break an established tradition and don't have cutouts anywhere in the game. DOEY, DOEY, and Pianosaurus have one, but none of the nightmare critters do. The most we do get is the same smiling critters cutouts from Chapter 3 scattered around the place, making these characters feel even more pointless, especially since they have an entirely unused VHS commercial that looks really good, sounds really good, and has some fantastic new renders of the critters. So why hype them up only to use them exactly as the smiling critters and not give them any personality so we can't even get attached to any of them? It's just so dumb. But once we do fend them off, we get at least one semblance of solace as we find the best cutout in the entire game, that being Yarnaby.
The name's Yarnaby. Would you wanna be my friend? Press the button to brush my mane. Brushy, 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 brushy.
Oh, how I love this little guy and his stupid noises. We do a simple code puzzle and progress into the main entrance to the prison, where Ollie tries to reach out to us and warn us about something, but can't due to interference. We then get one of the most uncomfortable scenes of this chapter, as we open a door to a hallway littered with corpses. You would assume, after all this time, they would be skeletal, but what really gets me is that these corpses, each and every one of them, is mummified, meaning in some way, someone wanted to preserve this hallway and keep it exactly like this with no decomposition, keeping everything like it was in the Hour of Joy all those years ago. And at least we know they weren't lying when it says the darkest chapter yet. We then, through an optional tape, learn about the Omni Hand, a grab pack hand that gives the higher-ups access to every part of the facility, and the tape shows the Doctor gaining possession of said hand, giving an explanation to how he controls the environment around us. This hand will become our main driving force of the chapter, as without it we can't do anything against the prototype. Heading into a new cell block, the Doctor fills it with Catnap's red smoke, as we fight our way through it, pulling off boards and squeezing ourselves through tight corridors to grab a valve and minimize the gas flow, with the pressure from all of this causing the window next to us to explode as the Doctor continues watching us. We then reach a testing/interview area with 3 doors open, giving us access to files on Yarnaby and Pianosaurus. Yarnaby, according to the Doctor, is deemed a failure. However, he sees use in it as a bit of security. So his plan is to isolate it and make himself the center of Yarnaby's world, so that it will only listen and obey him. Pianosaurus, however, is deemed to be an overall failure and is of no interest to Harley, with him not expecting it to survive at all. However, next to the note, we find a certain multicolored substance attached to a chair. Upon entering the last doorway, the Doctor locks us in, beginning to monologue about how something about us is different, and he wants to push us a little bit further to find out what. Dismissing everything we've been through before this, as he releases his own pet upon us.
Oh, Yarnaby.
He's so stupid, oh my god, I love him. Yarnaby acts our semi-antagonist for his first third of the game, and I love him. He doesn't have any dialogue and he only does what the Doctor says, but he has some really fun encounters on the first playthrough, and is honestly a highlight of the chapter. He's also our first semi-free roaming enemy in some sections, allowing us to run, hide, and juke him when needed. And overall, I had a great time with his character throughout the entire game. Coming across a locked gate, a yellow and blue hand reaches down from the ceiling and opens it, allowing us to progress. Yarnaby then proceeds to block our path, but that same hand distracts him, allowing us to enter a vent just out of his reach and continue, with Yarnaby following close behind. We then get to the server room, and oh my god, he's so stupid and cute, like seriously, he's one of my favorite characters ever, just look at him. Once we do manage to avoid Yarnaby, which didn't take a million attempts on stream, trust me, we find a tape hidden away. And when playing it, we get a recording of the higher-ups at Playtime Co. talking about Harley and his involvement in Huggy's escape, the catnap toys having the red smoke when they were shipped out, and a mysterious theater incident. But before we can learn any more, we progress to a storage area covered in that same multicolored substance we saw earlier, as Yarnaby gives chase and our mysterious helper guides us to a small room, allowing us to go through a vent and exit to the goat Pianosaurus' cutout.
I used to be in a band, then the asteroid hit.
I don't know why, but I absolutely love this dinosaur, and I had big expectations for him going into the game. After all, he got his own trailer and was a hidden character found in the ARG for Chapter 4, and Mob was shaping him up to be a really important character. That being said, we enter a viewing chamber with Pianosaurus inside, and we accidentally fall into the pit, landing face to face with him as he gears up to attack us, and begins rushing towards us before he's grabbed, tossed around a bit, and taken out back to be shot by John Playtime. Like, I'm sorry, what? You have this character you've built up for multiple months. You gave him a whole trailer back in December that showed him alongside the Doctor, building him up as either a subordinate or another pet like Yarnaby, and you waste him like that? It's not even like he wouldn't have fit anywhere else in the game. There's this whole section where a big Baba Chops plushie, yes, not even a bigger body, just a massive scaled up critter chasing us, and you're telling me you chose that over a Pianosaurus chase? This thing got more screen time than Pianosaurus, a character who literally had his own trailer. Just let that sink in, okay? Like, why even build him up to waste him? Okay, Mob, I know you guys must have known that the reaction was going to be outrage when you, again, gave the bro an entire trailer on ARG. Like, come on, man. You guys were out here trying to stop people from descrambling his image too early because you want to leave it for a big reveal, and you use him for 17 seconds. As Fiznom perfectly put it on Twitter, I get why he's called Pianosaurus, cause his screen time got extinct. His cutout has more screen time than his actual bigger body. And who did Mob have commit such an atrocity as killing Pianosaurus, you may ask? It was DOEY. DOEY the Dough Man, you know. The guy on the cover of the game? Yeah, him. DOEY acts as an ally for us throughout the chapter and guides us a safe haven, and I'll 100% be going into his character later, but there is one thing I want to talk about that's really prevalent on both DOEY and Yarnaby. I don't know what it is, if it's my settings or something else, but both of them have this like weird fuzziness around them. It's not too noticeable on Yarnaby when he's in motion, but seeing DOEY do things like this and having a cut in his lighting where you can see how weird he looks does kind of bring me out of experience a tiny bit. They do, however, do some really fun stuff with DOEY's shapeshifting abilities in these early sections by having him turn himself into a bridge and a platform. Moving forward, we reach a prison yard where we learn that effectively, the toys were put here at night as a gladiator pit and pulled out before they died, as we also get Dog Day's Family Guy death pose, so what's not to love about this area? Still, we pull open the doors and catch up to DOEY, who, despite looking has less going on in his head than Yarnaby, sends us down an alternate route to Safe Haven, as we pass through a kitchen with body bags hanging from the ceiling, as they swing and thud when we walk past, encountering the infinitely jumping rat, and finally entering the namesake of this chapter, Safe Haven. So, who's gonna tell me the prototype was actually Dr. Crankcase from Scavenger's Trap Team? But in all seriousness, this is not at all what I was expecting the prototype to look like, and I'm a little confused how his bony arm fits into the crab legs, but I guess that's something we're just gonna find out next chapter. This entire scene is also really chilling, because we've known the prototype has been following us effectively since chapter 1, but seeing just how close behind he actually was is haunting, especially since the people who save us are Poppy and a very wounded Kissy, who probably at the end of chapter 3 threw hands at the prototype and somewhat won. I mean, Kissy's burnt alive and Poppy's terrified for her life, but I guess that counts for something. To avoid the prototype, Poppy and Kissy lead us towards the showers, where we get our first look at the other friendly critters down here, as this is the spot where they've all gathered for, well, safety. As soon as we get to the door, we rush inside and the defenses are re-engaged to keep the prototype from entering. I've got to say, I'm not a huge fan of this new cutscene situation. Sometimes it just feels like I'm sliding all over the place to where they want me to be, and in other instances, the camera just breaks, forcing me to look in a different direction and see nothing that's happening. I mean, I just don't get why they added this when most of the cutscenes of this game continue to use the real-time style every other chapter followed, and it just follows the theme of Mob doing things where they try and fix what's not broken, and 9 times out of 10 they just ruin it. If I were to take a shot in the dark and guess why, it's probably to stop speedrunners or to create more cinematic experiences, but it just ends up falling flat and feeling rushed and janky in most instances. Still, we're welcome into Safe Haven with very closed arms, as Poppy tells us her plan to send the factory sky high using the red smoke at a high enough pressure mixed with explosives so they can kill the prototype and kill everyone, ending this once and for all. But to enact the plan, we need to get the Omni Hand off the Doctor and free the orphans the prototype is holding in the labs. We're then free to explore Safe Haven, with the toys around us being very wary of both us and Poppy. Something I was immediately drawn to was the murals along the wall, as they just go to show how Catnap, the Doctor, and the prototype are all perceived this deep down. They're depicted as all-encompassing threats surrounding them at all given times, and while one of the prototype's pets may be dead, they are still surrounded and constantly hunted, struggling to survive off the scraps and barely having enough to scrape by, let alone eat for days on end. DOEY then guides us to the generator room, explaining in full who the Doctor is and how the Omni Hand works, before asking us to reconsider our options on killing the prototype.
Toys out there, Safe Haven. They're my family. I understand what Poppy wants, what she believes is right. Destroy the factory, destroy him. But I ask you to consider, if we throw everything away, everyone, just to kill the prototype. How much do we waste?
Our mission now is to find and kill the Doctor by any means to acquire the Omni-Hand. But on our way, we find a pretty interesting tape about the relationship between Poppy and Ollie, with Poppy crying after being experimented on and receiving a call from him where he attempts to comfort her to some success, saying that,
I'm here, Poppy. For you, I'll always be here.
Now, if it's not clear already, this chapter is very heavily focused on storytelling and expanding the lore as opposed to horror. I think I can speak for everyone when I say that Poppy Playtime and Mascot Horror peaked in chapter 3 with just how terrifying everything was. However, despite finding out some cool stuff that chapter, the story was just very minimal. In chapter 4, however, it's the complete opposite. The horror of this chapter has taken a somewhat of a back seat compared to the story this time, as the chapter focused on developing our existing and new cast to set up for chapter 5, and our showdown with the prototype. Allowing everyone who hasn't been keeping up with the ARGs, the book, and the lore drops between chapters to have all the relevant information needed to understand the story via notes and VHS tapes. And it's really nice of Mob to include this as opposed to games where you need to read 16 different books for the next game to understand one character. But I digress. We then travel to the sewers beneath Safe Haven, where DOEY and Poppy argue above about her disappearance and what to do, as DOEY believes they should find a way to save everyone, but Poppy is dead set that they need to end it and stop the prototype once and for all. But before they come to some kind of agreement, they are interrupted. Heading up, we get another call from Ollie, but the signal is so messed up it's almost impossible to tell what he's saying in full. And we then get a reintroduction to a fan favorite character from chapter 2, Barry the Carrot, who was used for one single puzzle and then tossed away just like he was in 2022. Oh 7 Barry, we will miss you. Crossing the gap ahead, we hear a soft, broken music box playing, but thinking nothing of it, we proceed to open the door only to be greeted by Yarnaby attempting to break through. Sneaking through a gap, we begin the Yarnaby boss fight, learning that he is attracted to the sounds of our running and grab pack, so we need to be careful when using them. Now, upon release, this entire segment was near impossible to complete, due to how aggressive Yarnaby was. I was playing this just before the day 2 patch on stream, and Yarnaby was consistently spawn camping and killing me when I was in hiding spots, making no noise whatsoever. But upon downloading the patch, I'll hand it to Mob. They did a pretty good job of rebalancing this segment, and making it a lot more engaging and enjoyable to play, as he won't just snatch you through the wall anymore. This entire segment is one big power puzzle, with Yarnaby being a roaming AI, having him crawl through the vents to teleport him near you so he's a consistent threat. Here, most of your time will be spent messing with different configurations of power and what needs to go where, to activate different things like hand scanners and buttons. And it's genuinely such an engaging and fun puzzle because Yarnaby is present. If he wasn't, it would just be another boring power puzzle. But Yarnaby helps to keep the player on their toes and be constantly moving when you hear stupid little groans and nom sounds. It's also just genuinely scary to see him walking under you or through the glass and having to hide when he's nearby, only hearing his booming steps all around you. It's once again a really engaging segment, and even after dying a couple of times on stream, I didn't find myself bored at all, and I felt after patch that every death was just a learning experience. Once you finish the puzzle and begin opening the exit, the doors behind you begin reopening and Yarnaby begins his chase in a similar but significantly shorter segment of the Dog Day chase in chapter 3, attempting at the end to copy us swinging across a ledge only to be hit multiple times with a flare gun and sent plummeting while on fire. It's a pretty unceremonious death all things considered, and I've heard people complain about this, but like, we knew these toys were flammable since chapter 3, we knew Yarnaby was dumb, and at least he went out in a better way than fucking Pianosaurus, okay? We take the small victories when we can. Hopping into the John Playtime escape capsule, we arrive back to where we were originally before encountering Yarnaby. Heading out of the room, we find DOEY tinkering with a pipe, gathering different parts for the generator, before he's hit with straight up liquid nitrogen, as we quickly redirect it and he breaks free, his body losing shape slightly as he drags himself away in pain, telling us that the doctor knows how to hurt him, and presumably the rest of the toys, which is why no one has gone towards him and tried to stop him before. We then head back to the doors we opened earlier, as the doctor begins taunting us for a bit, saying that we are exactly what the prototype fears, and questions our motivation for being here, as our character can't have just come back after getting some cryptic message. After solving a puzzle, we enter the morgue where the doctor's lungs are kept in stasis. And upon attempting to open the doorway, the doctor freezes our hand in place, as the cold begins to climb up our body. The doctor talks about Poppy's side of the story and how she sells herself as innocent, when really, she had a part to play in the Hour of Joy, that she knew it was coming, and she was involved heavily, sowing seeds of doubt into our head, reminding us at all times that she betrayed us.
You've seen what they do to each other. All they want is violence. Look around. Evidence for it is everywhere. Once they had choice, once they were free, this was their creation. They've made hell real and trapped us both there.
Despite his attempts at comparing the two of us, we still proceed to connect the temperature control to the container holding his lungs as it freezes, shattering them. But the doctor calls this all futile, as he doesn't need anything we could potentially get close enough to destroy, and it's all replaceable. But this is actually a really interesting line of dialogue, as it implies that putting Harley into the Playtime system wasn't a copy of who he was. It means that he's the real Harley Sawyer who was chopped into pieces and connected via his organs to the systems. And it's as simple as just breathing for him to attack us, which is both terrifying and really fucking cool at the same time. We then find a new gas mask that superglues itself to our face and has a limited oxygen supply, which is used in running around the outside of this area as it's covered in the poppy gas. Our goal here is to find 5 toy bodies around the area and find their tags, then put the last numbers in an order to unlock the room upstairs to the doctor's liver. And this, in my opinion, is the most haunting section of this game for one simple reason. When you get close to any of the toys, you get to hear a conversation between them and the scientists / heads of Playtime Co. Their worries about if their adopted family will love them, the scientists' callous voices about ripping them apart, a child asking why it can't feel its body, and so much more. There's such small moments in this game, but they're all so haunting and unnerving that I can't help but continue thinking about them over and over. Once we put the code together, we can head upstairs and burn Harley's liver, as a nightmare critter jumps us and snatches a mask off our face, before we lose the ability to use our purple hand and swap to any others. We then attempt to get close to the doctor by swinging across a gap, but he shocks us, sending us plummeting down below. Can I even call this a boss fight? I've already said my piece in this section. It's bad, I don't like it, simple as that. This could have at least been swapped out with a Pianosaurus chase, because at least then, Pianosaurus could have killed you when he caught you instead of just giving you a love tap and running off. Like, it's not often that I feel so much genuine hate about a section in a game, but this is one of those times. I just think this could have been 1,000 times better than what it ended up being. This whole run around, get the battery, hit the button, repeat just sucks in all honesty, and anything else would have been so much better. But nevertheless, we avoid the big Baba Chop plushie and make our way to the doctor, where the TVs around us burst to life as he watches us, making his first big public appearance of constantly watching us and learning what makes us tick. And upon entering, we instantly get jumped and sent down to the basement, where we have the doctor boss fight, which again struggles the same way the Baba Chop's fight does. I don't know who was in charge of this segment, but the setup was there. When we drop down, we're surrounded by the husk of the doctor, giving the player a sense of never being able to find and destroy this guy. We assume we need to collect batteries and defend this singular area like the catnap fight, and the whole time you need to avoid the doctor and his many bodies or you'll be killed. But instead, we get a run around, find battery, repeat, and again, the doctor doesn't kill you in one shot. He just hits you, you can keep running. Hell, I bet if you knew the passing and kept running, you could beat this no issue without even seeing the doctor. And even when you're gonna go destroy Harley's brain, killing him in the process, the bodies around him only activate after you destroy it, not before, losing any sort of tension and horror this could have had, as it ends up just being, okay, he's dead now, let's move on. It's the same issue I had with Pianosaurus, that he's built up to be a major threat and just falls flat. On the character side of things, however, the Doctor is really good. When we meet him, he's already a fully developed character with motives, wants, and a personality. And we learn more about him via the ARG tapes and notes we find. His arc is explained not during the game, but in and around it, which while making his death to the average player a lot more underwhelming than it was, for me, someone who knows almost all the lore surrounding Harley, I can't help but feel this manipulative son of a bitch was just wasted in his boss fight. Again, he's such an interesting character in the trailer and during the game. Hell, after we beat him, if you found a key card during his area, we can actually access his office and find the letter from Elliot Ludwig, where he terminates Harley from the Young Geniuses program, which was a program run by Playtime Co. to find someone able to enact the Bigger Bodies initiative, as he saw that Harley only cared for progress for the sake of it, not to better humanity. Highlighting his lack of empathy and in an attempt to empathize with Harley, he says that this could be a good thing like it was for him, and that he could learn how to empathize with people out in the world. There's also 2 other audio logs in the room. One was Harley talking about the children and what they would have been without him and the bigger bodies, and another of Harley defending himself against the prototype, as he's the key to cracking some big mystery that Playtime Co., even in its prime, was struggling to figure out. But as soon as it came to the climactic moment where we face off against this manipulative, unfeeling monster who will do anything to defend himself, the prototype, and his ideals. Hell, he has us at one point choose to spare or kill a nightmare critter, and when you do kill it, he absolutely pops off. Also, fun fact, I brought up Yarnaby playing that distorted music earlier, and that's because the doctor thought, you know what'd be funny? Let's give him a music box for shits and giggles. He's just an evil, manipulative shit, and yet it all goes out in a whimper instead of a bang, and I can't help but feel disappointed. Because he is such a good character, and I cannot help but feel he was just wasted throughout the entire game.
You saved.
Still, we focus on the mission and grab the Omni Hand, which can be used 4 times to open doors and activate equipment, before making our way back to Safe Haven via a gondola, reminiscent of the one that we used to enter Playcare. As we travel, we get to see just the vastness of the area we've been through throughout this chapter, witnessing all the places we've survived and those yet to come. And when we get back, Safe Haven is abuzz with joy and hope. Now that we have the Omni Hand and they're celebrating the Doctor's defeat. Poppy and DOEY, wasting no time, bring us to the generator, with Poppy explaining how the prototype must be desperate now, knowing that he's losing, as she begins to explain her plan again, but DOEY stops her, trying to find a middle ground that doesn't sacrifice so many people for the sake of killing the prototype. But before they can come to a compromise, Ollie calls us, telling us that the prototype is right outside. Poppy and DOEY go out to try and hold him off while we work with Ollie to restart the generator. Upon succeeding, Poppy comes back to congratulate us and sends us on our way to Foundation, telling us that DOEY is still hunting the prototype and to meet her back here at Safe Haven once we're done. Heading into the foundry, we find the area behind Barry is now open. Heading inside, we begin collecting the explosives and redirecting the poppy gas. And once everything is set up, we escape and run into DOEY, who is frantic, having lost track of the prototype and is asking if we've seen anything. But as all seems quiet, DOEY begins piecing together where he might have gone, as an explosion bursts through Safe Haven, with DOEY and the player both rushing back to look for survivors. As we approach, we hear DOEY's screams and see the toy bodies littering the floors, with Poppy and Kissy nowhere to be seen. Finally, we reach the main room and find DOEY among the wreckage, where he begins to break down as he realizes that all of his friends are dead because of the prototype.
My friends! He killed my friends! You. It all started with you. You and her. It was you who ruined everything! No, that's not true. They jump-started the generator. They destroyed everything! I'll kill you!
Okay, let's talk about DOEY now. You may have noticed I neglected to talk about his VHS tape that starts this chapter, and that's because I wanted to talk about it more in depth because this tape honestly has so much relating to his character just hidden in plain sight. DOEY is overall related to the idea of three becoming one. His body has three swirling hands separated until it all merges into his blue body. He has three distinct tones and personalities throughout this chapter. One happy and childlike, one more serious and mature, and another angry and sad. We can see this even clearer in the VHS tape at the beginning, where he changes the picture of the family into these three distinct personalities. And notice how none of them have any multicolor on them. That's because each color represents one of DOEY's parts, the three people inside of him and the three children becoming one, as we find notes throughout the chapter detailing experiment 1322A through C, and we actually know who all of these people were. 1322A is Jack Ayers, the child in the second half of the intro tape who falls into DOEY's dough. 1322B is Kevin from chapter 3, who is having complications and showing aggressive behaviors. And 1322-C is Matthew Hallard, a dream child full of charm and charisma. and these three will be put together to create DOEY the Dough Man as a bigger body, being 900 pounds of pure dough, and due to the mixture, their memories are fuzzy. And when Jack's parents receive a note a few days after his accident calling them back to Playtime Co. to see their son, DOEY doesn't recognize them because Jack isn't in control, leading to such a haunting tape that I recommend you fully watching your own time, or even just play the game to experience, because it's just wow. It's filled with so much emotion, so much dread, and so much sadness, and so much fear as DOEY can't recognize these people as his parents, assuming they're scientists who want to rip him apart, poke and prod at him, screaming that the gentle voices lie before killing them in cold blood.
You. I've never hurt you. Hey, open this door. Oh God, Susan, please open the door, please.
DOEY, despite being in almost no advertising, is such a good character as these three people learn to work together, form connection with the other toys, build a family, and work to protect them with all their lives. Then, all at once, it's ripped away from their hands as their emotions get the best of them, morphing them into this disjointed monster of rage, with Kevin pushing the other two down in his anger, and we're forced to fight them throughout the caves, running away from them and freezing them with the liquid nitrogen just like the Doctor, and bringing a saw down on them. And this is such a fun boss fight slash chase, by the way. It's so well built up, so well executed, and I found no bugs while playing, and it was overall a really enjoyable experience due to how many phases DOEY had, and how just different his attacks were. Just well done, Mob, 10 out of 10, gold star. But once we think it's all over, DOEY appears behind us and grabs us.
You! You and Poppy! It's all your fault! Want to kill you! Can't trust anyone! The gentle voices lie! You lie! I'm trying to be better, to be who they needed. Smart enough, not good enough, not... I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I want it to be known that I will never emotionally recover from this scene. Mob, I'll be seeing you in court. DOEY was just overcome with emotion, and if things had gone any differently, he could have focused his anger and helped us against the prototype. But the three children lost balance and couldn't keep themselves together after all those cared about died for Poppy's failed plan. We then get one more tape of DOEY expressing exactly this. How he has the best chance of escaping, but none of them could live on the surface, and he needs to be there to protect all of the toys after Poppy ran away without a word, feeling like he's failing them every day, but always picking himself back up to protect his family. DOEY is probably, in my opinion, the best written mascot horror character in recent history. He is just so fun, and he's just such a great character with a great arc, and it's one of the only characters Mob didn't waste his entire chapter. Once the tape ends, we only have one way to go, but besides it lies a Huggy cutout, which is the only mention of him throughout the entire game so far. After we exit into the vents once again, we stumble across a hiding Poppy and Kissy, with Poppy trying to contact Ollie before immediately accusing us of betraying her, as she then gets a call from him.
Ollie, something's gone horribly wrong. The safe haven... Shelf ventilation block B6. Is this where you are, Poppy? What? Stay where you are.
And listen closely.
You... What did you do with Ollie?
I'm
Right here, Poppy.
for you.
I'll always
Be here.
I mean, come on, we all saw this coming from a mile away last chapter. But it's so much more heartbreaking once you truly understand the relationship Poppy and Ollie have from that tape, as she refuses to believe at first that this is the prototype, as he begins taunting her, saying how he's taken the explosives and put them to good use, as we can physically hear him closing in as he hints at how special he and Poppy are and how he's disappointed that her time in the case didn't make her see things like he does, as Poppy in a blind fear abandons us into the vents, and the prototype points out her hypocrisy as the player and Kissy are left alone with it ticking in the background getting faster and faster.
Don't worry, I'll find her.
As for you two, try to land on your feet.
Kissy trying desperately to hold us up, but her body is just too damaged and her arm tears off, sending us plummeting down deeper. We then wake up in the caves once again, and we find ourselves in an entrance surrounded by poppy flowers, with the door in front of us being the flower we were originally sent here to find. And using our Force Omni-Hand charge, making it effectively useless, we open the door and find the tape reminiscent to the first time we ever entered the Playtime Co. factory.
Hi, my name is Leith Pierre, and I'm the head of innovation here at Playtime Co. If you're seeing this, you must be very, very lost. Well, rest assured, friend, our state-of-the-art laboratory is just up ahead. Why don't you just go on inside and tap one of our scientists on the shoulder? Tell them you're lost. They'll be glad to help. All right.
This feels like
Let's be
the
honest.
chapter 1
You're not
tape.
supposed to be here. This is the single most high security, high clearance section of the whole factory. When someone finds you down here,
Oh,
you
no.
will be shot. And
He's
before you
not.
get any ideas,
He's
don't
not
think you
alive.
can just sneak away either. No, the second you put this tape in, it set off an alarm. So
He's
if
not
anyone
alive.
calls, they know exactly where you are.
He's not
I
still
mean, anyhow,
going.
Security is very important to us here.
He's not still going.
I'd start running.
Move over, FNAF 6 speech, there's a new sheriff in town. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone between and not in between. It was not copium we were huffing. Huggy did survive the fall and is now our final challenge between us and the prototype. The stage is set. We're finally at the lab where all the bigger bodies were made and tortured and the orphans are stored. It's the prototype's home and his final resting place as we face off against our first ever antagonist, the one that impacted the player character and the player themselves the most. And what a fantastic end. I just love this full loop of coming from the character that introduced us to this world to now being our final obstacle against this monster. However, as much as I sing its praises, this chapter was overall a very rocky one. The intro is pretty solid. It establishes the prison as a genuinely threatening location with some haunting set pieces and moments, and it's just a great time to explore and experience. Then we leave Safe Haven for the first time and it starts to stumble a little, everything gets kind of fall flat and characters start dying left and right without much build up. Then we get the Omni Hand and things pick back up into peak territory. Some people have said this chapter feels rushed, but I didn't feel like that during my playthrough. I thought the pacing was fine and overall I had a great time with this chapter. Was it buggy? Yes, and I didn't mention it mainly because it didn't have an impact on my enjoyment. Sure, sometimes walls wouldn't load and I was able to walk through vents with my head sticking out, but none of it caused me to get softlocked or cause any major issues during my playthrough, and Mo has been actively working on fixes for everything. The game does feel like a slight graphical downgrade compared to Chapter 3, but overall it still lives up to that mob quality standard. The animations are great, the gameplay is still really solid, and the puzzles were fun and not mind-numbing at all. I do however feel it just needed a week or two more in the oven to iron out some issues and fix any bugs that popped up, and overall just optimize the loading times, because the lag in some areas was crazy. The only true criticism I can really give about this chapter is that I feel like it lacks an identity. Chapters 1 through to 3 all had one main identifiable threat we had to face off against, but here it's more of a clearing of the board to get to the prototype, and it does feel kinda disjointed and messy when you can't signal out a main threat. Yarnaby and Pianosaurus are fodder for the most part, DOEY is an ally for 99% of it, and the only kind of main threat we have, that being the Doctor, is dealt with within 5 minutes, so yeah, not great on that part. But here we are at Chapter 5, it's now us versus the prototype and Huggy, whereas our goal is to save the orphans and end this once and for all. So hopefully in a year or so I'll be back here covering the final chapter of Poppy Playtime. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in whatever I make next. Bye bye!